everybody, welcome to Compliance Live. I'm Amanda Hosenfeld, and it is the end of the year. 2020 has been challenging for so many people for so many reasons. Today's show is going to be a little bit different. We're going to be highlighting shows from 2020 that we liked the best, that had the biggest impact, that got the most response from our audience. So enjoy our top 5 clips from our 2020 shows. Mark from accounting would like everybody to know that this podcast is sponsored by ComplianceLive. So thank you to ComplianceLive for offering this space for valuable ethics and compliance related content. Follow us on our social media. We are on Twitter at ComplianceLive and on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at ComplianceLive. As always, thank you so much for listening and stay compliant. Number 5, dating in the workplace. Facebook and Alphabet Incorporation's Google, employees are only allowed to ask a coworker out once, and if they are turned down, or if the answer is, I'm busy or I can't that night, that's perceived as a no, and they're not allowed to ask again any further. It doesn't explicitly say this, but I'm assuming that any further asking could be potential harassment.
I think that is a very modern solution.
Yes.
You know, I think given our society today and a lot of the
like Me Too time's up kind of discussion.
I think this is extremely progressive. I love seeing it in the workplace because I think, you know, organizations like these, like Facebook, like Google, we kind of perceive them to have a lot of our Gen Zers, a lot of our millennials with these different viewpoints.
Right.
That think, well, I really do spend 40, 50, 60 hours here a week. You know, where else am I going to meet people?
Right.
You know, when do I have the time? So I love that they're letting it happen and they're taking precaution for the employee. Not even just for the organization, for the employee.
I think that's really awesome that a company that, especially companies that are that big, say, look, it's going to happen and we're okay with it as long as you're not stepping over that line. And I, since it's so specific, I would assume that they have forms and procedures in place to where if something went over that, no, I can't that night, that's perceived as a no, that they have the reporting functionality to do that. I wish more companies would.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to look at dating in the workplace because dating isn't just relationships. Dating is, hey, do you want to go get coffee? You know?
I think that's really a great point. We'd say dating like a couple that has been together for, when I think of dating, I think they've been together for more than a month or two. Right, but it also applies to a date, a interested
party. You want to go see the movies? You know.
Right. So Facebook also has a policy that I think is also very interesting. They say that if a potential date involves a person in a more senior position than the other, that the date itself doesn't have to be disclosed to HR, but because Facebook trusts its employees to disclose a relationship if it becomes a conflict of interest. So the way I'm reading this is that, hey, if it's one date, then you don't have to report, I went on one date or I'm going on one date, because it might not work out. It might not be a love connection. You might never want to see them again.
You don't want to tell HR that, like, hey, I'm going on a date, and then, oh, never mind. Like,
I didn't like their latte order or something. I can't get down with chai tea.
That's embarrassing.
Right. So it just, I think that's a great point too. Like, it prevents kind of extra knowledge where there doesn't need to be, like, I don't need to disclose to HR if I'm going on a date with somebody, and if it doesn't work, then somebody in HR knows, and that's a potential risk that other people would know. And then what if I decide to go on a date the next week with somebody else?
What if I'm dating around? Right, that's exactly what I was thinking, because especially in these massive organizations, like, your dating pool potential is probably pretty big, right?
Yeah.
And like, what if you're going on very frequent dates with your coworkers? Like, you would get to know your HR rep pretty
Real
well
well.
if you had to disclose every date with them.
Like, I know if it was me in HR, I'd be like, he's again? And that's a potential risk. So I think, these companies, they have modern, like you said, they're modern solutions for modern issues.
Yeah.
And I think when it comes to dating policy, we need to think outside of the box as far as it's either a yes, it's allowed, or no, it's not. I don't think that's the way you can look at it anymore.
Take some of the situations that could happen when two people decide to go on a date even.
Right.
And then come up with solutions or ways to address those specific issues. And because it's not a holistic approach anymore.
Number 4, staying positive in COVID.
So I think we're very similar in that way, that we're the most introverted extroverts you'll ever meet. Like we're very introverted, and so a lot of our socialization comes from when we go into the workplace.
Yep.
And so it's been a huge adjustment just from our side coming into the office, where we're dealing with half of our staff. And while Compliance Line is saving significantly on the amount of coffee that we're drinking per day, it still is hard to stay positive on my end because I don't get to interact and I don't get to see the smiling faces that I get to see every day. I think one of the big parts of staying positive here is just kind of have compassion and learn to adjust. I know that for your team especially, this has got to be a really hard time because you guys have like in-person meetings every single day. And now we try really hard not to walk past Nick's desk because it looks like the Brady Bunch squares where you guys are all having your meetings. Does that change the dynamic of your relationship with your peers?
I think a little bit. No one shows up to the meeting on time, and usually you'd have those kind of little side conversations here and there where you're kind of almost further getting to know your coworkers, and it's just that's the kind of little stuff that I miss. Although I think our team check-in meetings are still very important, and keeping that communication is how it's helping me stay positive and get through it. Being able to have those meetings daily, even though they're not in person, it's still very helpful for me to kind of game plan my day and feel connected to my team and my company and not to feel like I'm just out here alone on an island.
Do you find that your meetings are more full of like surprises now? Because let me just set that stage. We were getting set up to do this podcast recording and your cat jumped up on the table, and like I've been lobbying for years to get Nick and Gio to let me bring my dog into the office, and it's just not working at all. So do you find that like everybody on your team that's working from home has that sort of understanding and compassion for when things that happen?
I think so. I mean, especially, during the morning meeting, there's a couple of team members that have children, and occasionally they're making an appearance during our morning meeting. And usually, we'll all stop to say hi and, not let it be a disruption, but kind of incorporate it into the meeting in a way so that's not, we're making those kind of exceptions and being compassionate of other people's responsibilities at home in addition to their work. Because now we've kind of just meshed the two together, and it's not always easy to find that balance between the two, especially if you don't have experience working from home previously, or if you don't have a lovely home office / craft studio like I do to work in. Some people have less than ideal setups, and kind of making those exceptions and understanding is, I think, huge for our team.
Number 3, our interview with Travis Jones.
But I want to talk a little bit about what you're currently working on, which is socially responsible work. Can you tell us a little bit about socially responsible work? Let me get that out first, and how you came to be interested in that.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, because I am really excited about this concept, and if this word or phrase doesn't work, let's even talk about this now, because I keep Googling socially responsible work and I don't think it's coined yet. So this could be like the
Here's your hashtag. There you go.
Exactly. So
all copyrights to ComplianceLive.
be looking for it on coffee mugs and t-shirts. So none of this is original, like most ideas, but I think, and you all can tell me what you think, I think socially responsible work the language I want to stick to, at least for now. But I think about it as an umbrella that captures lots of other ideas that business scholars, organizational scholars have been thinking about. It includes the importance of like job quality studies, meaningful work, which, you know, a lot of psychologists have written about, like what are the things that make a job meaningful. And then you're starting to see, I think, some buzz around human flourishing at work, kind of this old Aristotle idea about what are the kinds of things that human beings thrive in and grow in. And some of that is in good, we find fulfilling and that we grow, you know, through. The socially responsible part is me putting my hook into the already there language of corporate social responsibility and social responsibility broadly. Because I think if you dig into a lot of the research around why like meaningful work is important or why job quality is important, a lot of the times it's framed around employee engagement, employee morale, you know, productivity, retention. And I think there's an ethical layer that organizations owe their people meaningful work from kind of a moral imperative. And then organizations owe society, you know, as members of societies and cultures, they owe it to society to be providing places where people come to find, you know, meaningful and fulfilling and good work.
So I have a question. Just for meaningful work, just to differentiate, doesn't mean that you go into work every day and you're working your dream job, right? Like, I think there's a distinction to be made there that, you know, I love my job. It's not my dream job of, you know, animal caretaker on an island, but I still like a private island, but I still feel like the work that I do here is meaningful, right? So that is that a distinction that you feel is necessary?
Yeah. So I've been thinking about like the subjective parts of meaningful work. So this kind of gets back to, you know, what we talked about, perception. So yeah, I think there's a like space for how what might be meaningful for one individual might be dreadful or terrible for somebody else. I think that's really what I'm, you know, interested in. But that's another hook that I think you just brought up is like millennials in much larger number than other generations are entering the workforce looking to do meaningful work that's tied to some larger cause or bigger kind of impact. And yeah, I think, you know, so very few people in life get their like dream job, you know. What was it? Dog walking on a private island or something?
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, we'll go with
animal,
that.
animal care. But yeah, I mean, I think yeah, I think whatever we can do individually to fight for the best win-win, while at the same time pushing socially for this to become normalized, that you know, that we shouldn't just settle for having a job. Are you employed or unemployed? Or you know, well-paying jobs, which is also really important. But in addition to that, thinking about the importance of you know, fulfilling meaningful work. And I would be interested, you know, like we talked about the way teachers, if you've been an educator before, the way some of those core skill sets or those core characteristics of educators overlap like into sales, right? Or, you know, marketing maybe, or leadership in some ways. Like I think that might be one way to think about there's a core kind of the kinds of stuff that I like to do that might have some other stuff that just might be the more jobby aspects. You know, is a way maybe to think about that balance.
Number 2, our interview with Aaron Nicodemus.
You know, most of the problems that companies were dealing with from a compliance perspective had to do with employees, and employees either misusing the equipment or accessing through unsecured networks or falling for spoofing or phishing, where they would give away you know, either money or codes to bad actors. So I mean, training is really what companies need to do to get their employees up to speed when they're working from home.
Okay, I love it when people talk training to me because
Oh, yeah?
training is it is it actually is my love language. So I was going to ask you, we have all taken that compliance training in January. Your compliance training is coming up in January, Michelle. You're welcome. And that training on, don't use an unsecured internet thing in the Starbucks. And how much do you think this situation is going to change those annual compliance trainings, on the IT side or really on any compliance side?
I think the biggest way it's going to change is that companies are going to spend a lot more time and energy monitoring their employees. This is something that has been very controversial. However, companies look at it as a way to protect themselves. If they see someone downloading a large amount of data, can they press a button to say, we're going to stop that right now. We're going to find out whether that's legitimate or not. Can they, in the financial services, you need to monitor employees for things like, insider trading or stock manipulation. And so there's some industries that have monitored their employees for years, but they used to do it from the office. And they say, when you come into the office, they'd say, put your personal cell phone right over here in this basket. You can't use it, can't touch it until you leave, right? Now they're working from home. Mm-hmm. Now what do you do? Because obviously you can't take away their stuff. So do you need to start tracking their personal cell phone? In some companies, the answer is yes.
So I feel like, I feel like some of this can be very malicious. So, but I think a lot of it also is just from a lack of education or know-how from the employees. So do you think that it falls on the company to make sure that they're properly educating their employees on how they should be operating and using these laptops when they're not in the office, and best remote work practices, and how much of that falls onto the company as far as not just monitoring the employees, but kind of taking that, educating them and taking that proactive step?
Yeah, I think educating them is the first thing that should happen, and the most important thing that needs to happen, because if you get the employees to buy in, you get them to think, okay, I'm helping to protect our important data, the things that make our company, what it is, then I'm helping the company. I'm keeping the company from suffering financial losses or loss of business or what have you. By being a good employee, I'm helping the company succeed. And something that I think if you promote that with employees, that's a way of saying this is how you can do good, as opposed to this is bad, you're dumb if you do this, that kind of.
So you just flip that from like a glass half empty to a glass half full. Like, no,
yeah.
Because it's kind of startling for me, because when you say, be a good employee, I'm thinking, yeah, don't watch Netflix on your laptop. But what it's like, it also can be those nefarious things like don't, download company property and use it for insider trading. Like that's not.
Or even so, like a lot of people will use their business laptop as their personal machine too.
Yeah.
I know people that don't even have a computer because they have a business computer that they use for their personal stuff too. And I think there kind of needs to be a little bit more education around that division as well.
Say it again. Say there needs to be more training.
More training. Education.
Here's something that's happened in this remote work time that has been a surprise to companies, I think, and that is people are actually more productive working from home than companies ever dreamed they would be. I think so many upper management people were thinking, if I let people work from home, I'm going to see them for 15 minutes a day, and the rest of the time they're going to be out walking their dog or shopping or whatever. But they have not found that to be the case. In fact, employees working from home have been more productive since the pandemic hit than anyone expected.
Number 1, our interview with Solomon Carter.
I know when I was growing up and I was little, I didn't kind of think about, wow, when I grow up, I want to be in compliance.
Sure.
But did that happen for you? Is compliance always kind of something that you've been working towards?
Sure. So that is an excellent segue, actually, because I was kind of in the exact same situation. Originally, I was engaging in compliance activities and didn't even know what compliance was. So I have always thoroughly enjoyed writing. I have a passion for writing, and I believe that that is my gift. And so I was writing policies and procedures. And so as I matriculated through several roles, I was always the policy guy and the procedure guy and the rules and regulations guy. And certainly what was somewhat congruent with that are the leadership positions that I had, and that I had to enforce some of those things. And so over a period of time, I came to learn that I was the compliance guy before I knew what compliance was, right? And so that wound up happening until I matriculated into a director role and gained my expertise in compliance, and then started doing some consulting and some other things. And then somewhat in a linear fashion, I'm a professional development guy as well. And so there came a time in consultancy and serving as the chief curriculum development officer for a firm and working with the federal government that I realized, particularly when teaching leadership classes and some of the subcategories that derive from leadership, I realized that I could not teach leadership without also teaching compliance. And I felt that they went hand in hand. And in addition to that, I saw a gap in that there were leaders who would tell training what to do, but they didn't have expertise in training, right? And then you have, in some cases, leaders telling compliance what to do, or compliance operating independently. But in order for compliance to be successful, I believe that training has to be at the forefront of everything that compliance does. So from my standpoint, how is it that training and compliance don't work hand in hand? You're not going to have people being compliant unless they're properly trained. And so the two kind of came together, and that's kind of how I got into it. Then certainly in addition to that, I serve as the executive director for All Power in His Hands Christian Mission, which is a mission and aid organization operating in Haiti. We have a food program and a medicine program and some other things. And lo and behold, in that role, we don't have a compliance officer. That kind of fell on me as well. And so certainly when operating in a third world country and some of the nuances and intricacies associated with doing that, compliance is a really big deal. And so between all of that, there came a time when I started contributing to the Society of Corporate Compliance and Ethics and the HCCA publications, and I thoroughly enjoyed that and my expertise in that and consulting. And then here I am, so to speak.
Yeah, so that's how we found you. I actually saw one of your articles in Compliance Week and reached out and asked you to join us today, and we're so glad that you were able to. In reading some of the other articles that you kind of sent us, some of your work, a lot of it focuses on, the company culture and training, which is Amanda's love language, by the way.
It is.
Excellent.
So you're talking about policy and writing and procedure, and Michelle's over here. I don't know if you could hear her through the mic, but she's kind of giggling because those are my, like, I love those. I love policy and procedures so much. And of course, training is my thing. The compliance is often seen kind of like the department of no. Right? No, you can't do that. No, you shouldn't do that. No, we should do it this way. No, you can't train that way. You have to train this way. Do you see that as true? Or is there like a space for us to get to compliance is the yes? Does that question make any sense?
It does. It does. It makes perfect sense. So what I have found is compliance divisions or compliance offices, so to speak, rely on the no, as you have said, but unfortunately they're missing the mark because no is a good tool, but it is not the best way to have the positive results that you want. It's a tool, and it is not the resource. It's a small component of what it takes in order to have success. If telling people no is all that it took for people to be compliant, then there wouldn't be a need for a compliance department in the first place, right? And so, it's a resource. And so what happens is people mistaken no, which is just a tool, for a way to solve a comprehensive problem, right? And so what happens is, from a compliance standpoint, I find that people will say, hey, we told them no 50 times, and we've told them no 1,000 different ways. Why didn't they do it? And now that they have not done what we have asked of them, there needs to be disciplinary measures. And so what that does is that puts organizations on the proverbial hamster wheel, right? Because no is not a form of training. Again, it is simply a tool.
We want to take a second just to thank you for being a listener, for responding to our podcast, for liking and sharing our videos. We appreciate each and every one of you.